So good morning, everyone. In today's teaching, we want to look at the life of Joseph and especially how he had faith. And I picked up this phrase from Hebrews chapter 11. In Hebrews 11, Joseph is one of the examples of a person of faith. And he is the last person from the book of Genesis. So in the book of Genesis, we have several people who lived by faith. It starts from Abel, then Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, and then lastly Joseph. So Joseph is the last person, and a lot of the chapters have been dedicated to his story. So his story is very inspiring, and we can learn a lot from his story. Especially, it teaches us, how God deals with His people, how God promotes His saints, and also we see a lot of similarity between the story of Joseph and the story of Jesus Christ. So it begins. The main story begins in Genesis.
Rudy, we're not seeing the presentation. I don't know if it's not shared right now.
No. No.
There we go. But it's in the yeah.
Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint.
Yeah, click on slideshow and then press from the beginning.
Okay, you see now?
It's like if you're in PowerPoint, like if you were working on the PowerPoint.
Okay.
It's not in the slideshow.
I don't know what is the.
It's in kind of the top center of the taskbar, next to animations and record slideshow, and then there should be a start from the beginning in the main button area after you tap on that tab.
Should I just use the other view only?
There we go. That's it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So you can see this verse, Genesis 37 verse 3.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you, Jackson, also check if the recording is on?
Yeah, it's going.
Okay, thanks. So the story of Joseph begins like in detail from Genesis 37. So from Genesis 37 all the way till the end, we are, we see the story of Joseph. So Joseph, he was beloved by some, and of course his father, but he was also equally hated by his brothers. So we see in verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So Joseph was the favorite of his father, Jacob, probably because Joseph was the firstborn son of Rachel. And we know that Jacob loved Rachel and he wanted only to marry her, but there was all that problem, and then he has 4 wives. But his love was for Rachel. So because probably Joseph is Rachel's son, he has special love for him. And he does special things for him. He makes him a special tunic, and he's favorable to him. If we remember the story of Esau, when he thought that Esau is coming to kill them, probably might be coming to come and attack his family, he keeps Rachel and Joseph at the end, so that they would have the best chance of survival in case of his brother tries to kill them. So he was very much loved by his father, and in Jacob's eyes, Joseph was his firstborn son, and he was going to give him the best of the inheritance. But because of that, he had equal amount of hatred and even more from his other 11 brothers. And they scorned him, they mocked him, and they hated him because of jealousy. And they knew that he was the firstborn and the father is going to bless him more. So apart from that, I feel that he was also loved by Jacob more because he had good character. We know that he, brought in the evil report that he saw, evil things that he saw probably the brothers were doing. He would not just let those evil, ungodly things pass by. He would go and report it to his father. And we see that he also had character, and that is the reason probably also Jacob loved Joseph so much. And then the story goes on that he had a dream, and that dream is significant, very, very significant, because it is God revealing to Joseph a great hope, a great a blessing that he has planned for him. So in verse 6, and he reveals his dream to his brothers and to his family members, because I feel the dream was also a blessing for them in the long run, which they did not see, of course. So in verse 6, he says, and he said to them, please listen to this dream which I have had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dream and for his words. So this was a cause of more hatred, which was kind of, the final straw, they say, that breaks the back. After this, they started hating him even more, and they, of course, tried to kill him later. Then again, he has another dream, which is similar to this. And it says in verse 9, now he had still another dream and related it to his brothers and said, lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. And he related it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? So Joseph knew that this was not an ordinary dream. Joseph knew that this was a prophecy. And Joseph was a prophet. God was revealing him the things of the future. And he gets the same dream twice, and that shows that this was a certain and established thing that God is going to make happen. Because we know the Pharaoh later also sees the same thing twice in 2 different dreams, and Joseph tells Pharaoh, now because you have seen the same dream twice, it's a established thing, and God is surely going to make this happen. So even his father thinks that he's foolish, and of course in that culture, that would never happen, like this, the parents serving the children and bowing down to them. So none of them saw the prophecy. And I feel that, I think that they missed the point that through him, they also would be blessed. It was not just about Joseph. So Joseph is given hope of glory. This is like God enlightens him to a kingdom that he will be sovereign over, and that through him, many people would be saved. So then though he has this dream, God is going to bless him. We know that Joseph did not immediately or easily accomplish this great plan that God had for him. And immediately after the dream, he is kind of not even close to being a king or a sovereign, but he's on the opposite side, where he is actually a slave, serving in some foreign country, having just like being a nobody. So in Genesis 39, verse 1, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt. I think those phrases are important, like brought down signifies being humbled, being, in suffering and affliction. So Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelite, which had brought him down hither. So here it is, a dream of being a great king, a sovereign, but in reality, a slave, suffering under, in a foreign country. So nothing could be more further from the dream that he had. But this is God's plan. God exalts people who are humble. So in God's plan, the way up is actually first the way down. In Luke 14, verse 11, whosoever exalts himself shall be abased, and he that humbles himself shall be exalted. So this is a very clear message of the Bible that we first need to be tested. We first need to be humbled so that we can show our faith towards God, and then only promotion comes from God. There's a great passage in Psalm 105, verse 17 about this phase of life of Joseph. It says, he sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They afflicted his feet with fetters. He himself was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. The word of God tested him. So it's a very interesting phase, until the word came to pass. That means until he actually became a sovereign, that same word tested him. And that is how the kingdom, the word, the message of the kingdom, the word of God is. After we receive it, after we believe it, we are going to be tested. And Jesus taught this in Matthew chapter 13, verse 20. The one on whom seed was sown on the rocky place, this is the man who hears the word of God and immediately receives it with joy. So this man has faith when he first hears the kingdom message, and he shows it with great joy and happiness. Verse 21, yet he has no firm root in himself, but is only temporary, and when affliction or persecution arises, because of the word, immediately he falls away. So the key phrase here is persecution comes because of the word, because of the message of the kingdom, because of the the new covenant that we need to follow. And once we start following those things, we are going to be persecuted. We are going to have resistance from our friends, our family members. And also we might have to let go of privileges and comforts of this life. So that is good, but right, that is good because we need our faith to be tested. We don't want to suffer for our own wrongdoings, but it is good to be tested because of the word. So to test, so this test tests whether our faith is temporary or permanent, right? Because it says showing the initial joy is temporary, but faith shows that faith in hard times shows that our faith is permanent. So all the years now since so when he was 17, he was sold as a slave. He does not become a king until he's 30. He does not rule and reign in Pharaoh's kingdom until he's 30. So that is almost 13 years. So for 13 years, Joseph's faith in the hope, in the promise was tested. And he showed his faith by his behavior. In Potiphar's house, he was faithful in the little things that was assigned to him. In verse 4, Genesis 39, verse 4, and Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. So this is Potiphar, right? A pagan Egyptian commander or someone in Pharaoh's kingdom, but he was faithful in that, and he was a nobody. He was a slave. He was serving him faithfully. So we see that he was faithful in little things, and that is very important to God, that we should be faithful in little things. In Luke chapter 19, verse 17, it says, and he said unto him, well done, good slave, because you have been faithful in a very little thing, be in authority over 10 cities. So this is the parable where, God gives like little things, and those who are faithful in those little things, when God actually blesses them in the coming kingdom, he gives them much, much, much more. Then Luke 16 verse 10 is a very interesting passage. It says, he who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. So it's a test, the little things of life that tests our faith. God is testing us if we are faithful in those things, and then the bigger things he can depend on us for bigger things. And he who is unrighteous in very little is unrighteous also in much. So it goes the other way also. If I'm stealing small things, if I'm lying here and there, little things, when the bigger test comes, most likely I'm going to do the same. So it's important to keep our character in small things too. Verse 11, if therefore you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous mammon, who will entrust the true riches to you? So this is talking about the present life, the present things that we have in this life. If we don't serve God faithfully with what we have now, why would then God make us a sovereign ruler in his coming kingdom? Verse 12, and if you have been faithful in the use of that which is another, if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another, who will give you that which is your own? So it's extremely important that we show our faithfulness in small things. And that is exactly what Joseph did. And it is such a great picture because he had no clue that one day he would do the exactly same thing for Pharaoh, right? He would be doing exactly the same thing, what he was doing in Potiphar's house, for the whole nation. And not only for the whole nation, actually for the whole world, whole known world at that time, because the famine was worldwide. So then, though it seemed that he was going through a hard time, there is a very powerful verse that tells us that God was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. In Genesis 39 verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph. So though when we are going through suffering and hard time, it seems like we are alone. And it seems like nobody is there to help us or to, relieve us from a situation. By faith, we should see that God is with us. And that is how it was in Joseph's life. And so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So Joseph's character, I think Jackson had mentioned this, that to do Joseph's character, we know that God was with him, the Lord was with him. And also, it was supernatural. Like Potiphar just couldn't figure out what's happening yet. I mean, this was supernatural. He recognized that the blessings that is coming through this man is from God, is from the Lord. Because in verse 3, he says, now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. And, a similar teaching is also in 1 Corinthians 7. Paul teaches us that we also should remain in the condition that we are in, that we are called in. And we should be faithful and obedient to God in whatever circumstances we are in right now. In 1 Corinthians 7 verse 20, he says, let each man remain in that condition in which he was called. Were you called while a slave? Do not worry about it. But if you are able also to become free, rather do it. So, of course, slavery, we don't see it so much now. I mean, maybe there is to some extent, but it must be a tough situation, like someone else actually owning you. It must be quite a hopeless situation. Of course, maybe not all masters were evil. But even Paul is saying you can serve God, and God can be with you in that situation. Of course, he says that if you can be free, if you can be a master, you can become free, please go ahead and do that. And we see Joseph, exactly, he was doing that. He tried his best. He was trying his best to come out of the situation that he was in. Sometimes it didn't work. I mean, when he tells the people who he interpreted their dreams for, he would tell them, remember me when you go out, and they would forget him. So he tried to become free, but he was serving God in whatever situation he was in. He was not living in self-pity. He was not miserable. He was serving God in whatever situation he was. So this is such an amazing and powerful thing. Our situations can be varied and much, much different, but we can still serve God. And verse 22, for he who was called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's free man. Likewise, he who was called while free is Christ's slave. So no matter who we are, we need to be reporting to God, right? God, Jesus is our boss, and doesn't matter what the status is of our life is. Then moving on, Joseph, no matter where he was, his character never changed. He was a servant and a faithful person in Potiphar's house. He was the same when he was in the jail. He was the same when he was the second to the king of the entire nation of Egypt. He remained the same. We see that in verse 49 of chapter 31, it says, Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea very much till he left numbering, for it was without number. So he was a servant. He served in that capacity that he was in. So that is important. Our character should never change. And that is who we really are. Really, if we are behaving differently in different situations, when people are not looking, or whatever, then that is not really a character. Hebrews 13 verse 8, it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today, yes, and forever. This is speaking of Jesus's character. He will always be the same, how he was when he came in his first coming, the way he was obedient to his Father, the way he was faithful to his disciples. He was the same after his resurrection. We see the stories of him, how he came and ministered to the disciples and encouraged them. And Hebrews is saying he will be the same forever. So that is how Joseph was. Then towards the end, we see that Joseph died in faith. He was looking for a much bigger promise to be fulfilled. He knew that though he was blessed as the sovereign in the nation of Egypt, he knew that was not the blessing that God has promised him. And I think he understood Genesis chapter 15, verse 13 and 14, because that is what he kind of quotes towards the end of his life. So in Genesis 15, verse 13 and 14, it says, and he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs. So that is Egypt. And shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. So I think Joseph understood this prophecy. Now he understood what's going on here, that God is bringing to pass what was promised to Abraham. That this is Egypt, this is the strange land, we are in a strange land, and this is not the promised land. This is not where God is going to bless us. This is not our inheritance. So that's the reason in Genesis 50 verse 34, and Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. So what a great faith Joseph had. It was not about him, for Joseph, it was not just about him, though it could be very easily. I mean, he was the ruler of Egypt. I mean, he was blessed like no man. But it was about, for him, it was about the promised land, the inheritance that God has promised to Abraham. So he makes them swear, and that is exactly what they do. We'll see in later chapters. So Joseph died in faith, and this is very important, that we keep our faith until we die. We need to die in faith, right? And of course, he also understood the resurrection. To die in faith is to believe in the resurrection, that God will one day raise us up and bring us into the inheritance, the coming kingdom. So Joseph died in verse 26. So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. This is a very fascinating story. This part of Genesis. In obedience to his command, they did not actually bury him. They kept him. They did some special, they embalmed him so that the body is preserved and kind of decays, gracefully. And they kept him in a coffin. They did not put him in the grave. And he is not buried until the end of Joshua almost. which is almost like about 500 years later, they actually give him a burial in his inheritance. Now, it's such a fascinating story that kind of connects everything. So he's actually buried by Joshua under Joshua in 24 verse 32. And the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem in a parcel of ground which Jacob brought of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver, and it became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. So he was buried in his inheritance. So I was like thinking, the promise of a land and an inheritance really did not start with Moses so much. It is connected, like all this thing is connected. And Moses, growing up in Egypt, and all the other saints like Aaron and all, they would actually witness the coffin of Joseph. They would see, and I'm sure they would ask question like, why is the coffin here? And then of course they would say, this is a temporary land, we are going to go here from here. And of course they actually did that. They carried his coffin, and they were having his coffin right through the wilderness journey, all through the 40 years, and then they are finally buried. And I kind of appreciate even more, God's frustration with the unbelieving nation. Because it didn't start with Moses. Moses telling them that God has promised you a land flowing with milk and honey. It was like all the way much before, going to Joseph and to Abraham. So Joseph died in faith, and he had hope in the resurrection. Okay, he knew that God would one day raise him up to enjoy the land that is promised. So in closing, I find this verse very interesting. It talks about how the bones will come back to life, because the bones signified Joseph, right? Joseph knew that he will be one day raised back to life. And this is a great passage in Ezekiel 37 verse 3. It's almost like such a clear verse on actually what the resurrection is. It says in verse 3, and he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I said, O Lord, thou knowest. And again he said to me, prophesy over these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter you that may come to life. And I will put sinews on you. I think sinews are muscles. I will put sinews on you, make flesh grow back on you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, that you may come alive. And you will know that I am the Lord. What a great verse, explaining the resurrection in detail. And I like how it ends. Only God, only the Lord, the Creator, can do this, right? It's not man. It's not I don't know, chances, evolution, right? All those things. It's God. And of course, Paul also says, like, why do you think such a great thing, like God would raise someone from the dead? Of course, God can do that. So, one day, right, Joseph's bones are going to experience this. He's going to come back to life. I mean, that's amazing thing to look forward to. So, yeah, I mean, I find Joseph's story so inspiring. Amazing story. We can learn many things from it. So I'll stop here. If there is any question, comments, can discuss. Yes, Jackson, please go ahead.
I just always loved the story of Joseph, and it's one of those ones where just refreshing yourself on what he dealt with, and and just stayed faithful, like you're saying. It very much emphasizes how no matter what we're dealing with, we can do the same thing, because very few of us ever are dealing with problems as compounded as what Joseph seems to go through, not deserving it. So just great stuff. Thank you.
Yes, Sean.
Yeah, just general comment. What strikes me about Joseph was, I think underlying his entire life was his love for the Lord. You know, in the episode with like Potiphar's wife, where he just said, how dare I do this wicked thing and sin against God? And so that was like, he feared God in a reverent way. He loved God, had a really close relationship with him. And then that he didn't fall into bitterness. I think that's amazing, because of all the numbers of people that let him down, like his brothers, and then the betrayals, and then Potiphar's wife, and then even Potiphar, even though he knew he hadn't done it, he still ended up in jail. And then the cupbearer didn't really remember him, or he didn't remember him. And then all of those years he managed not to become bitter and trusted the Lord, whatever happened to him. And the Lord he raised him up amazingly in the end. But like you said, he always had, it was obvious that he had his eyes on the resurrection and the kingdom, ultimately, because it was so important that his bones get carried up to the promised land. So I think it's a brilliant picture for our lives, that come what may in our lives, we love the Lord and trust him and keep our eyes on the kingdom and the glory, then you're gonna make it through. So yeah, great stuff, inspiring.
Yes, Rosalind, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really nice comparison. And this is sort of little digression, but speaking of the resurrection, I found this verse in First Peter like a few weeks ago, or maybe, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago. And I'd never noticed it before, but it says that that Jesus was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. And so it goes on. And I was like, oh, because I kind of wonder what exactly happened, in what order and stuff. But it was so interesting to see that Jesus, or if I've interpreted or understood the verse correctly, Jesus was made alive in the spirit straight away, and went down and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. And it just yeah, just wanted to share that about the resurrection. Just it was just something that made me excited, so I thought I'd share it. Yeah.
Yes, Ray.
Well, I was very impressed by Luke 16:10. The one who is faithful in a little thing is also faithful in much. And it just made me realize how important our being faithful is. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Okay. We can have a time of prayer now, sometime.
Why don't you go ahead and stop the recording first?
Yes. Okay, if you're listening on the video, you're welcome to join us. Please check out our details in the description. Thank you very much. Bye.